The unexpected arrival. The evening was quiet when John sat in his small home, staring at the screen in front of him. He had posted a simple ad earlier that morning. Wanted. A cook. Must know basic meals. Nothing fancy. He didn't expect much. Maybe some local worker would show up, someone who could prepare food and keep the kitchen in order. He just wanted help, nothing more. Life had been dull, and he wanted to make it easier. Hours passed with no reply. The ad floated in the endless digital world, ignored like so many other messages. John almost gave up hope when suddenly there was a knock on the door. At first he thought it was just a neighbor, maybe someone selling fruit or offering deliveries. But when he opened the door, his heart froze. Standing outside was not what he expected. A tall figure stood in the doorway, wrapped in a dark cloak that seemed worn and torn. Her face was not human. Her skin was faintly silver, shimmering under the dim light. Her eyes glowed softly, large and filled with something between fear and hope. And in her arms, she carried a baby. The child was wrapped in cloth, sleeping gently against her chest. John's breath caught. You're not... He didn't even finish the sentence. The woman looked straight at him, her voice calm but trembling. I saw your ad. You need a cook. I can cook. The baby stirred, letting out a tiny cry, and she tightened her arms around the child protectively. For a moment, John was too stunned to move. He had heard of aliens, of course. Everyone had. Trade ships, stories, from the far colonies, rumors of strange beings passing through the edges of human space. But never, not once, had one walked to his door asking for a simple job. He tried to speak, but his words stumbled. Why are you here? This ad was meant for... He paused, realizing how strange his words sounded. For a human cook. The alien mother lowered her head. Please, I need work. I need a safe place. I can cook for you, clean, do anything. Just let me stay. For him. She glanced down at her baby, who opened his small eyes that glowed faintly like hers. John stepped back, confusion twisting his mind. This was absurd. He wanted a cook, not a problem. Not a fugitive, not a mystery, not whatever this was. But at the same time, something in the way she stood there clutching her child made him hesitate. There was no arrogance, no trick, only desperation. Do you even know human food? He asked carefully. Her lips curled into a faint, nervous smile. Yes, I learned long ago I can make what you need. He stared at her, his instincts warning him not to get involved. Who knew what kind of trouble she carried with her? But then the baby let out a soft, innocent sound, and John felt his chest tighten. A baby didn't choose where it was born. A baby didn't deserve hunger or fear. Against his better judgment, he stepped aside. Fine, come in. The alien mother's shoulders relaxed with relief. She walked slowly into the house, holding the baby close, her cloak brushing against the floor. John closed the door, his mind racing. What had he just done? He wanted a simple cook. Instead, he had let an alien mother and her child into his home. The kitchen light flickered as she entered. She looked around, her eyes scanning every detail as if making sure it was real, safe, and ordinary. She whispered something to the baby in a soft, strange language that John couldn't understand. Then she turned back to him. Show me your kitchen, she said. John pointed silently, still trying to process what was happening. She moved with quiet grace, placing the baby gently on a chair, wrapped tightly so he wouldn't fall. Then, to John's amazement, she began working as if she had always been there. She searched the cupboards, found ingredients, and started cooking with confident hands. The smell of food soon filled the room, familiar, warm, comforting. John sat down, watching her carefully. His curiosity grew stronger. How did she know human meals so well? Why was she here, alone, with a baby? And most importantly, what danger followed her? Because no one, human or alien, showed up at a stranger's house with a child unless they were running from something. For now, he stayed silent. But deep inside, he knew one thing. This was no ordinary cook. This was the beginning of something. far more dangerous and far more important than he ever imagined. And as the baby opened his glowing eyes and looked directly at John, he felt a shiver run down his spine. Something was about to change. Strange yet familiar. The kitchen was silent, except for the soft crackle of the stove. John leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, watching the alien woman move with quiet precision. She did not need instructions. Somehow she knew where to find pots, pans, even the right spices. Her hands worked quickly, confidently, as though she had cooked these meals many times before. The smell rose into the air: garlic, herbs, and roasted meat. It was a smell John had not felt in years, a smell that reminded him of home. For a moment, the tension in his chest eased, but then his eyes shifted to the child, lying wrapped in cloth on the chair. The baby's eyes blinked open again, faintly, glowing in the dim light, watching him without fear. John turned back to the mother. "How do you know human food?" His voice was sharp, but he couldn't hide the curiosity in it. The woman hesitated before answering. "Once, long ago, I lived near humans. I learned. Their food was simple but full of life. It stayed with me." John narrowed his eyes. "Near humans? Or with them?" She glanced down, avoiding his stare. Her silence was answer enough. Something about her story didn't sit right. Aliens didn't just live among humans, they weren't trusted. Not after the wars, not after the betrayals. Yet here she was, cooking meals as though she had been raised in his own town. The food was ready quickly. She placed the plate in front of him with a careful hand, her eyes watching his every move. John picked up the fork and tasted it, expecting something strange, something wrong. But instead, his eyes widened. It was perfect. The flavors were balanced, warm and real. It was exactly how his mother used to cook when he was a boy. He looked at her in disbelief. How do you know this recipe?" The alien mother lowered her gaze. "Because I remember. I remember the people I once served. They taught me, before everything changed." Her words carried weight like pieces of a broken history. John felt a chill. She wasn't just a traveler. She was someone who had lived among humans before, someone who had seen both kindness and cruelty. The baby made a small noise, reaching its tiny hands toward John. For reasons he couldn't explain, he leaned closer. The child's eyes glowed faintly, but there was something more, something familiar in the way they looked at him. Something almost human. John sat back quickly, his chest tightening. "Who is he?" he asked sharply. The woman froze. Her lips parted as though she wanted to speak, but no words came. Finally, she whispered, "He is mine. That is all you need to know." But John knew it wasn't the whole truth. Night fell outside, shadows creeping across the windows. The mother rocked her baby gently, humming a soft tune that sounded both strange and beautiful. John sat silently, but his mind was restless. Questions spun like storms. Why was she here? What was she hiding? And most of all, who was hunting her? Because he could feel it. She wasn't here by chance. She had come to his door because she was running. He wanted to demand answers, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the baby's soft breathing. Maybe it was the tired look in the mother's eyes, the kind of look only someone desperate and on the edge of survival carried. Instead, he asked quietly, "What's your name?" She hesitated again, as though names were dangerous things to share. Then, softly, she said, "Lyra." "Lyra," he repeated, the word strange on his tongue. Her eyes lifted to his, glowing faintly in the dark. "And you are John." He frowned. "How do you know that?" Lyra gave a faint, tired smile. "Because I read your ad. And because humans always sign their names." John didn't answer. He looked out the window instead. The night sky was filled with stars, silent and endless. But in that silence, He felt a weight pressing down on him. Something was coming. He didn't know what. But his instinct screamed it was close. Behind him, the baby stirred again, glowing eyes opening wide. Lyra whispered softly, holding the child close. "Sleep, little one. We are safe for now." But John knew better. Safe was not a word that lasted long in this universe. As the clock ticked past midnight, a low hum echoed outside, a sound like distant engines cutting through the silence. John's head snapped toward the window. Lyra froze, clutching her child, tightly. Her eyes widened with fear. "They found us," she whispered. John's blood ran cold. He didn't know who they were, but he knew one thing. His life had just changed forever, and it all started with a simple ad for a cook. The hidden truth. The hum outside grew louder, vibrating through the walls of John's small home. He moved quickly to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to look out. The street was quiet, but not empty. A shadow moved at the far end, slow and deliberate. A cold chill ran down his spine. Whoever it was, they weren't neighbors. Behind him, Lyra clutched her baby tightly, her eyes glowing, brighter in fear. "They're searching," she whispered. "We don't have much time." John turned sharply. "Who is searching for you, and why bring them to my door?" His voice cracked with frustration. He hadn't asked for this. He wanted a cook, not enemies prowling in the dark. Lyra's face twisted with pain. She looked at her child, then back at him. Her voice trembled. "Because I had no choice. They would never think to look for me here. Not with a human. Not in such an ordinary place." John stepped closer. Anger and confusion burning inside him. "What are you hiding, Lyra? Who is that baby? Why are they after you?" For a moment she stayed silent, torn between truth and fear. Finally her shoulders sagged and she spoke. "I once lived with humans. I worked for them, learned their ways, cooked their food. I was not seen as an equal, but I was safe. Then the war came. Trust broke, borders closed. My people and your people turned into enemies, families were torn apart." Her voice cracked. "And in the middle of it, I found someone who saw me as more than an alien." John's breath caught. He stared at the baby, at the faint glow in his eyes, and the pieces began to fit. The child wasn't fully alien. The child was half human. His heart pounded. "His father," John whispered, "was human, wasn't he?" Lyra looked down, tears shimmering in her strange eyes. She nodded slowly. "Yes. He was kind. He believed in peace, in unity. But when the war came, he was taken. From us, they killed him." Her arms tightened around her child, "and now they want to erase the proof that he ever existed. My son. Our son." John's anger faded, replaced by shock. He stared at the baby, so small, so innocent, carrying two worlds in his blood. A living secret that powerful people would do anything to destroy. "They'll never allow him to live," Lyra whispered. "To them, he is dangerous. A symbol of what they fear most. A future where humans and aliens are no longer divided." Outside, the shadow drew closer. A faint red. Light scanned the street, sweeping slowly across the houses. John ducked back from the window, his heart racing. Whoever was out there, they were hunting. He turned back to Lyra. "You should have told me this from the start. Do you realize the danger you've brought here?" Her eyes flashed with sudden strength. "Do you think I don't know? I have been running since the day he was born. No world would take us in, no people would protect us. I came here because humans still have hearts, still have hope." Her voice broke. "I came here because I had nowhere else to go." The baby stirred, whimpering softly. Lyra soothed him, whispering in a mix of human and alien words, her lullaby trembling with fear. John felt something shift inside him. For the first time, he saw not just an alien intruder, but a mother, tired, desperate, clinging to her child with every ounce of strength she had. A loud knock rattled the door. Both froze. John's blood ran cold. He motioned for silence, his hand instinctively moving, to the old rifle he kept behind the door. It wasn't much, but it was something. The knock came again, harder this time. A voice, metallic and commanding, echoed through the wood. "Open up. Routine check." John glanced at Lyra. Her face had gone pale, her arms wrapping tighter around her baby. She mouthed a single word. "No." John's mind raced. He could hand her over right now, end this nightmare before it began. Or he could protect her, protect them, but if he chose wrong, it could cost him everything. The voice outside grew sharper. "Open the door, now." John gripped the rifle, his breath heavy. He had wanted a cook. Instead, he had been given a choice that could alter not only his life, but perhaps the fate of both their worlds. He looked at Lyra, at the fear in her eyes, at the child who represented something greater than either of them. His jaw tightened. The knocking stopped. Silence filled the air. Then, slowly, the door handle began to turn. John raised the rifle, and in that moment he realized this was no longer about food or jobs or even safety. This was about survival, and the truth had just changed everything. The danger approaches. The handle twisted, rattling against the locked door. John's heart pounded like a drum inside his chest. He tightened his grip on the rifle, sweat forming on his palms. Lyra stood frozen in the corner, clutching her baby close, her glowing eyes wide with terror. The baby whimpered softly, sensing the fear in the room. Then, suddenly, the handle stilled. Silence returned. John didn't move. Neither did Lyra. The silence was worse than the knocking. It meant whoever was outside hadn't left. They were waiting, listening. Minutes passed, heavy and endless. Then a faint sound echoed, boots crunching against gravel, circling the house. John's stomach turned. They weren't just checking, they were hunting. Through the narrow crack, in the curtain he saw them. Dark figures moved with military precision, scanning the ground with red lights. Their helmets reflected the glow, faceless and cold. These weren't locals. These were trackers. Hunters. Lyra whispered, barely breathing. "They found us," John turned sharply. "What do they want? Just you? Or the baby?" Her voice shook. "Both. If they catch us, I won't live, and he." She looked down at her son, tears filling her eyes. "They'll take him, experiment on him, erase him from history." John clenched his jaw. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man who wanted someone to cook his meals. Yet here he was, staring at armored hunters outside his door, forced to decide if he would fight or surrender. The boots stopped. A sharp voice, cold and mechanical, cut through the night. "Inside. We know you are there. Open the door and surrender." The fugitive. "Failure to comply will result in force," the baby cried. Lyra pressed her lips against his head, whispering a lullaby through her tears. John felt the sound slice through his chest. He couldn't hand them over. Not after hearing the truth. Not after seeing the way she held her child like he was the only reason she kept breathing. He stepped closer to her. "There's a back way out," he whispered. "Through the cellar. Leads to the woods." Her eyes widened. "And you?" John glanced at the door, then back at her. His voice was steady now, the fear replaced by something harder. "I'll buy you time." Lyra shook her head quickly. "No. If they take you, they'll know I was here." John almost smiled. "Then I won't let them take me." Before she could argue, the voice outside grew louder. "Last warning, open this door." John moved fast. He pulled open the trapdoor in the kitchen floor, motioning for her to climb down. She hesitated only a second before slipping into the darkness. Her baby pressed tightly against her chest. John lowered the wooden cover gently, hiding them from sight. The door shook as something slammed against it. Once, twice. The frame groaned under the force. John lifted the rifle, his breathing slow and controlled now. He wasn't a soldier, but he was a man with nothing to lose. And tonight he had found something worth protecting. The door burst open with a deafening crack. Shadows poured inside. 3 armored hunters, weapons raised, their red lights cutting. Through the smoke of splintered wood, John fired. The first shot struck the wall, but it was enough to make them scatter. He ducked behind the table as blasts of energy tore through his home, shattering furniture, burning holes into the walls. The hunters moved fast, precise. But John knew his house better than they did. He crawled low, firing again, forcing them back for a moment. Sparks flew, smoke filled the air, and his ears rang with the sound of battle. "Resistance is pointless," one of them shouted. Their voice was calm, robotic, as if reading from a script. "Surrender, and you may yet live." John barked a harsh laugh, though fear twisted inside him. "Not tonight." He fired again, and the nearest hunter fell with a metallic crash. But there were still 2 more, closing in. From below, hidden in the cellar, Lyra pressed her hand over her baby's mouth, tears streaming silently as she listened. Every shot, every blast of energy was a knife to her heart. She wanted to run to him, to fight by his side, but she couldn't. She had to protect her son. Up above, John's world was chaos. The house shook with explosions. The air burned with heat and smoke. He stumbled, his shoulder grazed by a searing shot. Pain ripped through him, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. For the first time in his life, he understood something. This fight wasn't about him anymore. It was about them. About the child who represented hope. About the mother who had risked everything to keep that hope alive. And as the hunters closed in, John shouted through the fire and smoke, his voice carrying more strength than he ever thought he had. "You'll have to go through me first." The hunters raised their weapons, and the night erupted into fire. The choice that changes everything. The night roared with fire and chaos. John's home was no longer a home. It was a battlefield. The hunters moved like shadows, their red lights cutting through smoke, their weapons blasting holes in the walls. John staggered, his rifle nearly empty, his body screaming in pain. Yet his eyes burned with something the hunters didn't understand. Defiance. He ducked behind the shattered table, reloading the last few rounds he had left. His chest rose and fell sharply, but his mind was clear. He had nothing more to lose, but the woman and her child hiding below had everything. From the cellar, Lyra held her baby close, listening to every sound above her. Tears slid down her face. She knew what John was doing. He was buying them time, with his life. A crash shook the house as one hunter kicked aside broken wood and charged forward. John fired again. The shot struck true and the hunter collapsed in a flash of sparks. Only one remained. The last hunter stepped into the kitchen, moving slow and certain, its red light glowing like a predator's eye. Its voice was calm, cruel. "You cannot win. Hand over the fugitives and your suffering ends." John coughed, tasting blood, but his lips curled into a grim smile. "Maybe I can't win, but I can make damn sure you don't either." The hunter raised its weapon. For a split second, time slowed. John thought of everything, his quiet life, his empty days, the moment he opened the door to a desperate mother and her baby. He thought of the child's glowing eyes, half human, half alien, proof that peace was possible, proof that fear could be broken. And in that instant, John knew his choice. He stood tall, rifle in hand, and fired his last shot. The blast struck the hunter's weapon, knocking it aside. Energy crackled, sparks lit the room. The hunter roared in anger, stepping closer. With no more bullets, John lunged. He slammed into the armored figure, driving it back against the wall. The house shook as they struggled, fists and steel clashing in the burning light. The hunter's strength was overwhelming, but John's will was unbreakable. "Run," he shouted, his voice carrying through the floorboards. "Lyra, run now." The trapdoor creaked open below. Lyra's eyes filled with horror as she saw him fighting, bleeding, refusing to fall. She wanted to scream, to rush to him, but she couldn't. She clutched her baby tighter, whispering through tears, "I will never forget." Then she slipped into the night, disappearing into the woods. Up above, John's fight reached its end. The hunter struck him hard, sending him crashing to the floor. His body trembled with pain, but still he pulled himself up, one hand gripping a broken piece of wood like a weapon. His voice was ragged but strong. "You'll never take them." The hunter raised its arm for the final blow, then froze. From outside, a blinding light filled the street. Engines roared, louder and closer than before. A ship, massive and dark, descended over the house. Its spotlight cut through the night and a voice thundered from above, "Stand down." The hunter hesitated. This was no ordinary patrol. These were reinforcements, but not its own. The insignia on the ship was human. John's vision blurred, but he saw it. The human fleet had arrived. They had been tracking the hunters, maybe even watching the same fugitives. The hunter cursed in its mechanical tongue and fled into the night, vanishing as quickly as it had come. John collapsed against the wall, his chest heaving. Relief washed through him, but also emptiness. Lyra and her child were gone, safe for now, but so was his old life. Nothing would ever be the same. The ship landed nearby. Soldiers rushed into the house, weapons ready. They stopped when they saw John, wounded, battered, but alive. One of them asked sharply, "Where is she? Where's the child?" John's lips curved into the faintest smile. He shook his head. "Gone. And that's where they need to stay." The soldier frowned, but John's tone carried a finality no one could break. As the sun began to rise, John sat in the ruins of his home, staring at the horizon. Somewhere out there, Lyra and her child were running, free for now. And though he didn't know where they would go, he knew this. His choice had given them a chance, a small chance maybe. But sometimes, a chance was all the universe needed to change. And so, what began with a simple ad for a cook had ended with a choice that echoed far beyond one man's life. A choice that might one day be remembered across the stars.